Welcome back to the Capital 10X interview series. We have Aurora Davidson, CEO of Amerigo Resources, with us today to provide an important update. Aurora, thanks again for taking the time to talk with us.
No, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So, Aurora, you put out an important update on your operations in Chile yesterday. Could you give investors some brief background on what caused the late June production outage?
Sure. So what happened was that on June 23rd, there was an unprecedented flooding across large areas of Chile. This was caused by extremely heavy rain and warmer than normal temperatures. We have to keep in mind that this is winter time in Chile. So under normal weather conditions, this heavy amount of rain would have just accumulated up in the mountains, in the Andes Mountains, as snow. But when that didn't occur because we were experiencing warmer weather, essentially just a deluge of water came running down the mountains and flooded significant amount of land in Chile, including the vicinity of our plant. So another thing to mention, our plant at MVC is connected to Chile's central power grid by a long infrastructure of power transmission lines, and one of the clusters of towers basically was damaged because of the floods. It was toppled, so down came the towers, down came all the power cable connected to those towers, and our power connection to the grid was shut down. We essentially lost all power. So we immediately worked on three things, and all of this was done concurrently. First of all, we secured backup power to operate critical equipment, essentially the water thickeners we needed to get water properly managed and avoid flooding within the plant. Another thing that we did, obviously, was bring in specialized crews to immediately start assessing the damage and working on a power restoration plan. And at the same time, we secured additional power to restart curtail production, alternate power sources that have allowed us to start processing and producing copper as of July the 6th. So currently we're processing fresh tailings and we're producing around half of our normal production until we're reconnected to the grid at the third week of July is our plan.
Great, that's helpful color. So even though the flooding was a stroke of bad luck, I think it vindicated the significant risk mitigation work you regularly conduct in Amerigo. So specifically, could you tell us more about the protective flotation equipment you installed around your slurry pipes and how they helped you to avoid expensive equipment damage?
Sure. Well, the project you mentioned is a risk mitigation project that we started in 2022 and we completed just earlier this year. Essentially, we installed flotation equipment around the Cauquenes pipeline, and that pipeline is critical to us because it takes the water to Cauquenes and brings the tailings slurry back to the plant for processing. So in the photograph, you're going to be able to see that there are orange wrappers around the pipeline. And these are essentially similar to kids' floaties. They keep the pipeline floating and they prevent it from drowning in the event of a flood. Now, the impact of having this in place was huge because we didn't spend a lot of money putting it all in, and it really provided a significant amount of protection for the operation under these conditions. And we hadn't had those flotation equipment installed, we could have faced significant damage at the plant. So this photograph here shows, for example, how high the water was at the height of the storm, and you can see the importance of having had this equipment in place.
Excellent. Now, I want to dig a bit deeper on that topic. Could you help us better understand Amerigo's process for evaluating and mitigating operational risks, like with the pipeline? It looks like you have a very robust process in place, but we'd just like to understand more about the inner workings.
Sure. Well, it starts with a basic life philosophy that we will always be facing risks, but some of those risks can and should be mitigated. So what we're fostering at the operation is a forward-thinking mindset, taking a few steps back from the day-to-day operations, and then from a wider perspective assess well, what risks are present, what could go wrong under X or Y scenario, and then conduct brainstorming to identify how can we mitigate those risks. A point to keep clear here is that despite the substantial amount of capital that we are returning to our shareholders, this can only be done in a sustainable way if we protect the operation, right? We cannot minimize the necessary and forward-looking capex to do that. And an example of that is the flotation equipment that we discussed. Another example is a standby power transformer that we're working on this year and which will be going live at MVC in 2024.
Great, that's very helpful. So are there any other protections necessary to avoid another power outage like this? Or was this just a once-in-a-decade event where the best you can do is implement those risk mitigation measures ahead of time, and then you have to hope that something like this only happens once in a blue moon?
Well, the power outage was caused by being disconnected from the central power grid because of the flooding. What we have done now in reinstating that connection, we have replaced the towers that came down. We have replaced another set of towers that could have faced a similar situation in the future, and we have basically upgraded to have a sturdier transmission power line overall. So by the time we are reconnected, we're going to be reconnecting, not only having replaced the necessary bits, but having an overall stronger structure.
Good. Now, just to end things off, I was hoping we could get a quick update on what you're seeing with copper fundamentals. Has anything changed in the data or your outlook since we last spoke?
No, the fundamentals for copper remain very strong. The price of copper has found a floor. There has been little short-term volatility within very tight ranges, and inventories are decreasing again. LME inventories yesterday were at 45% lower than in early June, so all is good with copper.
That's great to hear. All right, well, Aurora, as always, we appreciate your insights, and thank you very much for stopping by to update us on what's happening with Amerigo Resources.